All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about how we can manage input, which means that right now, whatever we have learned in the previous videos is we have data and we are simply, well, displaying the data. But what about if the user has to input the data? How do we handle that? Well, we know that if the user is inputting the data, they need text field, they need a radio button, they need a checkbox or a drop-down list, things like that, some sort of input control. So we'll always start with creating our input control. So I'm going to go over here and maybe we are asking for a customer information, which consists of the name and the age. So I'm going to go ahead and create a input text box, name, with a placeholder, which will say name. And I can copy the same exact thing for age, which will say age. Let's go ahead and take a look at how it looks like when it is rendered. You can see that we have a text box for name and a text box for age. And we can also have a button and we can say register or submit, whatever you want to say. It doesn't really matter at this point. Okay, so we got the submit. Now, how do we access this name value and how do we access the age value? If you were doing plain JavaScript, you would simply say document.getElementById. You will put some ID on the text box and dot value, you will get the value. Although you can do those kind of things, that's perfectly fine, but this is React, and React has a little bit of a different way of achieving these things. So every time you type in the text box, the on change event actually happens. Just like the on click events when you click on a button or some control, the on change event happens when you change something in a text box. And once this is firing, we can call our own custom function. So in this case, I can say this dot handle on change. The same thing I can do for the age text box on change. This dot handle on change. Now, one thing you will notice is when we are entering or typing something in the name text box, the on change is getting fired. And whenever we're typing in the age text box, the on change, which function that doesn't really exist right now, is getting fired also. So now we have to decide that are we capturing the name value or the person is typing in the name text box, or are we capturing the value that the person is typing in the age text box? Well, before we even do that, let's go ahead and create this function. And let's go ahead and see that what's going on. Like, is it even being called or not? Let's go back, check out the source. I'm going to go to the name text box and I will simply type in some name, which is John. And you can see that the handle on change is getting fired. If I jump onto the age text box and type in some age, you can still see that the handle on change is getting fired. Great. So now what we want to do is somehow we need to capture this value and we need to capture this value. Let's start with capturing the name of the person. When handle on change is getting fired, it is automatically being passed an event. You don't have to pass it anywhere, it's automatically being passed. And the same is true for on click also. It's just that for on click, we kind of ignored the event. We were not interested in it. But right now for this, to get the value from the text box, we are interested in it. So we are saying that, yeah, when you pass the event, we will capture it in a variable called e. But you can obviously use any variable that you want. Now this variable has something called target. This is a property. And if you print out the target or the value of this particular property, we'll see that what that is. So if you go and type in John, you can see that every time you type in, the target is actually going to give you the actual text box or the input box. And if you say e.target.value, you will be able to get the value that is stored in the text box. So I can go over here and I can type in John, and now I can see right over here, John. And you can see that every single time I type something in the text box, we are capturing those letters. So if I remove it, you can see that now there's nothing in the text box. If I start typing it up, you can see that at the end, when I'm finished, I get the whole thing that I typed in. Well, now the question is that how should I assign this, or where should I even store this? And that is where you can use the state variable. So I'm going to go over here in the state variable. This dot state equals to, and we are trying to capture the name, so I'll just create a name property and I will mark this as an empty string. I will go over here and I will get the value and I will put this into the name. So this means that I will call this dot set state and I will pass in the new state where the name will be whatever the person is typing in the text box. Now let's go back and we will check out the components. This is the React DevTools, and this is going to let us know that if our state is getting populated correctly or not. Right now you can see the state is completely empty. There's nothing in the state. So if I go ahead and type in something, John Doe, it's actually working pretty good. You can see that the state is now getting populated with the name John Doe. What happens if I go to the age text box and type in some age? Now you can see that the name is getting replaced by age because that is the value in e.target.value. This one. And the reason for this is that both of them are using the same exact onChange function. Both of them are firing the same exact function. Now you might be wondering that, hold on, well, I can easily configure this, I can easily fix this problem. Why don't I just create a function called handle age text box on change or whatever? And you're right, you can definitely do that and it will work perfectly fine. But what about if you had a form which contains 5 input boxes or 10 input boxes, and you will end up creating 10 different functions, each to accommodate one single text box. So you don't really want to do that. The another way of doing this is to distinguish between the values. So one value is for the name and one value is for the age. So how can we do this? If we go to the input box and provide a name property, and we type in the name to match the name property or the property in the state. So this name property, well, the value basically, this one, is exactly the same as the property that we have defined. And you'll see that why this is the same. The name property on the age text box, we're just going to call it age. Now, when we type in any of these text boxes, let's say this one, the event happens, and if we say e.target.value, we can get the value from the text box. But if we say e.target.name, then we can get the name associated with that text box, which in this case is, well, in this case it's name, because we're talking about the person name, and in this case it will be age, because we're talking about the person's age text box. To store the age, I will also go ahead and create another property in the state, which will be called age. And now I can easily do this. Now this syntax, which I'm about to do, is going to look a little bit weird, but we'll cover it, that what exactly this actually means. e.target.name and e.target.value. Okay, so what exactly is going on? So what we are doing is we are firing onChange event and we are calling handle onChange. When that event actually happens, depending on which text box you were typing in, the e.target.name will contain the name property value associated with that text box. So if I'm typing in the name text box, e.target.name will be name. If I'm typing in the age text box, e.target.name will be age. What we do later is that we take the name, which can either be name or age, and we create a brand new property in an object of JavaScript and assign it the value, which is e.target.value. So this syntax right over here is more of a JavaScript syntax to create properties. Over here, this will be the property name, and over here it will be the property value. And I'm just typing it out. Obviously this is not the correct syntax. I'm just typing it out to show you that what it actually means. So in our case, the property name would be anything that we are doing this in e.target.name. So the property name in the end will be either the name or age. The property value will be the value that we are actually typing in the text box. Now let's go again. I'm going to go ahead and say John Doe, and immediately you can see in your state that John Doe for the name property is populated. If I go ahead over here in the age and I type something in the age, now you can see that the age property is also populated. So now we have created this input form where whenever you type in something, it uses the name of the input form, the name of the input control, to create the property with the same exact name and assign it a value. Let's say what happens if I put this as full name. Can you guess what's going to happen now? So in the state, which is for React, I created the state which consists of two properties. One is full name and one is age. And if you look at the state, you can see that we have two properties, full name and age. What happens if I start typing something in this text box? You can see that it dynamically created another property called name and assigned it John Doe. And if I type in the age, that's perfectly fine. And the reason that it didn't really update the full name property is that that's not the property name that was passed to over here. And that's why we ended up creating a brand new property. So we'll just change back to name, which is right here. We'll just change it back to name and everything will be fine. So this is one of the ways that you can use React to manage your input fields.